Thanks for the warm welcome, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you.
So you've heard of him, it seems like. Okay. And I have the pleasure and privilege of getting to sit here, so I will try not to squander it. But I'm not actually just Shashi's niece. Am I?
She is a professor.
No, I'm your favorite niece.
That's true. She's also my only niece, but that helps.
So we have only so much time, and this is a wordy book, and we have a lot of things to talk about. But I actually would like to start by taking stock for a moment of where we are, which is this very beautiful venue, formerly a central jail, now a space for community-funded, citizen-driven, multi-day literary festival. And it's been incredible. This is my first BLF, and so I just want to start with a shout-out to Shiny and the team for a beautiful day.
Yeah. This is my third or fourth, and everyone gets better than the next.
It's been beautiful. And, you know, I was thinking about that, walking around a jail today, and at least one person seemed kind of creeped out by it, I admit, but I thought it was kind of amazing. And what that is, of course, is a kind of act of resignification, right? The jail has been reimagined, it has a new life. And that's one of the things that you talk about in the book, chapter 99-ish, okay? There's 101 chapters, I'm warning you. It's a chapter about the fact that meanings change, right? Words evolve, they accrue new definitions. And so as I was, walking around the jail, former jail today, I wanted to ask you about what it means to you, or how you are thinking in this moment about what it means for words to carry residues and pasts, right? What do those pasts and residues tell us? And what don't they maybe tell us, right? Like, when should a word be free of its history? How do you think about that?
Well, think about it, for example, in the context of the words the British took from Indian languages and incorporated into theirs. It's always striking that the British colonialists took the word loot into their dictionaries as well as their habits. But, the fact is, if the British hadn't come to India and done all that they did here, they would not have had the word loot. They wouldn't have had the word thug, which was a tug here. They wouldn't have had mulligatawny soup, which is mulligatawny. They wouldn't have had lots of other things, including, bizarrely enough, shampoo. Because the British specialized when they had to learn any Indian words. It was always in the imperative. They had to give instructions. So it was champo, which means press my head for me. And champo became shampoo because the process of heading, they were also cleaning the head. That's how the word shampoo comes into being. And so on and so forth. So words do have a history. And just as, for example, the presence of so many French words in the English language is a relic of the Norman conquest, and Latin and Greek before that from the Romans onwards, similarly, the presence of words of Indian origin is a reflection of contemporary history. So words do trail along with them these significations. Trust a professor to ask a question like that.
It's an occupational hazard. But yeah, the book is full of examples like that. It's rich with stories and anecdotes and a lot of evidence of the way in which the English language has cannibalized other languages, cannibalized, metabolized, whatever you want to call it. But actually, maybe we should just right away make sure everybody knows that you don't just speak and think in English, but you're also multilingual, but interestingly, self-taught pretty much in Hindi, Malayalam, and French, which I think are the other three major languages.
Right. Well, no, Hindi and French I can't entirely claim self-taught because Hindi was taught very badly in every state outside the Hindi-speaking parts of the country. So yeah, I got some pretty bad Hindi lessons. They improved when I picked up the language in the streets of Delhi as a college student. And as far as French is concerned, yes, I did attempt to teach myself, but then I wasn't very good at it. I got into the UN and enrolled in the UN's French courses. And there it turned out I had a bit of a talent for it. So I raced through a 3-year course in a year and a half, and I got the UN proficiency certificate. So I'm officially fully proficient in English, and French as well. I beg your pardon, French is what I meant to say. But yeah, the thing is, though, that it depends on what you're thinking about. The language you think in is a language that comes naturally for a particular experience, a particular moment, or a particular idea or thought. And I will admit that I think most of my ideas come to me in English because it's the language in which I've read the most and studied the most. And so it becomes a language, the vehicle for the expression of ideas and concepts. And I should be, I suppose, vaguely ashamed of it, as some leaders have told us we should be. But I'm not, because I learned most of my English in India. Yes, I was born in England, but we moved here at the age of 2.5. And my English was taught to me by Indian teachers in Indian schools in the English language. So, I mean, that's what it is. And I therefore acknowledge English as an Indian language in its own right. I've got a whole chapter here, slightly tongue-in-cheek, on Indian English. But it's not just that. The fact is that it is a legitimate language through which the Indian experience has been depicted, through which Indian nationhood was asserted and argued by the likes of Jawaharlal Nehru or Dadabhai Naoroji before him, and legions of others after him. The whole idea is that English has its place in the soil, or we wouldn't have a crowd like this in an English language literary festival, right? That's my point.
And I think it's maybe worth also just saying maybe the obvious for this audience, which is, I mean, there's been a lot of ink spilled on this argument, right? Is English an Indian language? And maybe you're definitively saying yes, many others have said yes. What did Vikram Chandra say? You know, something like English is my mother tongue, Hindi is my father tongue, or maybe vice versa, Hindi is my mother tongue. I mean, everybody's been writing about this for decades. But there's also, of course, more than one Indian English. And you've come to represent a very specific form or register of Indian English, right? If you Google around the sort of Shashi Tharoor versus Chetan Bhagat English, like this is
Chetan's a friend. He writes English that everyone enjoys reading, so no complaints about that. But I take the point. There are different registers of language, and mine is perhaps more formal sometimes, though I do think I can write informally as well. And you know, I've become fairly prolific as a journalist, or columnist is a more accurate word. And so depending on the subject I'm writing about, my language can also slip into informality.
No, it's not a criticism, right? And it's also not so much about formality and informality, but about different sort of ways of accessing different vernacular spaces or something like that, right? So I mean, but it is a sort of what we'd call, again, I'm going to use the academic language, it's a kind of heuristic, right? You've come to represent something, but I think readers will find in the book very playfully and self-consciously, and you know, with that kind of erudition that you're known for. But I want to ask you a question that maybe is unfair, but just because I can, and maybe somebody else can't. You know, so this book is divided into a number of sections, including borrowed plumes, the point of punctuation, there's a section on spelling, literary acrobatics, lexical evolution. If you were to, you know, start undertaking a many-year research project in one of your other languages, right? Let's say Malayalam or Hindi. What would 2 or 3 of those sections be? What interests you about, you pick either language, about one of those languages?
Well, I think Malayalam, one of the things that's often struck me is the extraordinary gap between the very formal, what we call Sahitya Malayalam, and the language that is spoken in the streets or in homes. And the other thing that's interested me very much is the extraordinary variations. It looks like a rather small state on the map, right? I mean, it's longish, but it's narrowish, so you can't really think that there are going to be that many different versions of Malayalam. But boy, there are. My family is from Palakkad, which is that bit, you know, if you think of Kerala as a curly bracket that sticks into Tamil Nadu, we're that pointed part of the curly bracket. And I'm elected from Thiruvananthapuram, which is right in the southern tip of the state. And in that short distance, I don't know how many, 150, 200 kilometers, 250, I'm not sure how much it is in a straight line as the crow flies, but the language is dramatically different. So the word we use for coughing in Palakkad is only used for barking in Trivandrum. So when I said my sister had a cough, they said, "Oh, is that the name of your dog?" And I said, "No, it's my sister." "Oh, why are you speaking of her as if she's your dog?" And one very quickly learns that there are differences like that. So those are the kinds of issues that happen. Whereas English paradoxically spans the entire globe, and there are amazing variants, including terms that can be misunderstood between Americans and Brits, let alone between them and Indians. But the fact is that nonetheless, because perhaps of the dominance of English in this increasingly globalized world, people tend to be familiar with these differences. Everyone knows that what the Brits call a flat, the Americans call an apartment, or what the Americans call an elevator, the Brits call a lift. And in countries like India, we probably use both terms and are equally comfortable with both. But there are terms which mean completely different things in different places. I often point out that, you know, when an American talks about a mugging, he's talking about somebody pointing a gun or a knife and relieving him of his wallet. In England, somebody who's mugging for the camera is making funny faces for the camera. It's nothing to do with being robbed. And in India, you mug for an exam, right? I'm mugging for my prelims. So if an Indian student tells an American or a Brit, I was mugging for my exams, incomprehension is guaranteed. They'll have no clue why you were making funny faces at your examiner or why you were pointing a gun or a knife and relieving people of their assets in order to take your exams. They would be very, very puzzled.
So I don't know how many people here know that you are a wordler. Those who have read the book will know that this man is like, I don't know if you're the world's most, like you've done the most Wordles. He's like the Wordle king. I happen to be on one of these WhatsApp groups where
there's a family group in which I inflict
where
my
Dr.
streak.
Shashi Tharoor posts his daily Wordles. It is as embarrassing as it sounds, but he really does that. And I will admit, so I have probably made some jokes about it, but when I was reading the introduction to this book, and I've heard you tell this story before, but I had kind of forgotten some of the details. You've talked about that. I'm sort of ruining your story, but I do want to hear it from you. And you talked about the fact that your father invented a version of this game many years ago, right? Pre-internet age.
Yeah, 50, 60 years before.
And so I want to ask you something. So, and you can tell that story, but it occurred to me that maybe you're posting that score or doing the Wordle as your daily homage to him in a way that I don't think I had realized. Is that true?
Yes, in many ways it is. You know, my father, her grandfather, was obsessed with words from the time he migrated to England straight from a Kerala village and discovered the joys of the language, which he was really self-taught in. You don't really learn very good English in a Malayalam village school, in a Kerala village school. But he ended up with a wonderful gift for language and words, and he wrote the most beautiful letters, never wrote much beyond that. But the thing is that he infected us with a love for words and the purposes they could serve. And one of the things he did, as I said, was he invented something like Wordle. That is, he would imagine a 5-letter word in his head and invite my sisters and me to guess it. And it, you know, because obviously we didn't have the internet and we didn't have gray squares and green squares. I don't know how many of you play Wordle on the net, but if you do, you'll know how it works. You guess and the internet immediately tells you through gray, yellow, and gray squares whether you've got the letter right, whether it's in the right place, whether it's in the wrong place, or the letters don't exist in the word you're trying to guess. Well, Dad would simply tell us 1 or 2 or 3, and we'd have to derive logically from our own guesses what the word would be. Believe me, it occupied us for many a long car ride. You know, you'll never notice Bangalore traffic if you're playing this game with your kids.
And you've written and spoken really beautifully about your father, my grandfather, and you do in this book. But there's also somebody else in the family who is just kind of an amazing wordsmith, and that's your mother, my grandmother, who just turned 90 this week.
That's right, and she still plays Scrabble, and a pretty mean game of it too.
But she does. But and the way she talks, though, and I guess because it's not in the book, I wanted to ask you. I mean, she says some really, really smart things, and I don't know if they're Indianisms as such, but she has certain phrases, right? Like, you know, when she'll say, you know, I have too much of ambition, you know, at my age and stage, you know, I have seen the cream of society. She WhatsApped me once and told me, you have to control your temperature. Right? I mean, or maybe she was talking about somebody else.
Her dad, I mean, my dad, exactly.
But like,
he didn't control his temperature very much.
Tell us what you've learned from her. What, like, the words.
You know, age and stage does stick in the head because she constantly talked about her age at every stage. So at various stages of her life, she lectured me on the age and stage that she was at. But you know, honestly, I don't associate my mother principally with words, precisely because they were my father's realm, as it were. And I don't think we need to go into a family psychoanalysis today, but But I'm delighted that, my sisters and I play Scrabble with her, and she enjoys it. It keeps her occupied, because at that age, it's very difficult also to sustain your attention, your interest in things very much. And I'm very, very pleased and privileged that I have her. But let's move on from family to slightly less personal stuff.
It's all stuff that you've written in your books. How many books have you written now?
Well, 28 is coming out in January. There is one more in between, but it's a very slender book. A short book on our Constitution, a concise introduction and commentary is the subtitle. It's called Our Living Constitution, and it came out last summer. It was not meant to be a very hefty work. It wasn't written for either lawyers or scholars. It was written for folks like you and me to just get a sense about the Constitution, stories about the Constitution and how it works and how it should be working. So it's there, and I hope you'll enjoy dipping into that too. But since The Wonderland of Words, that one came out, and the next one is going to be a book about a great Kerala sage whom I'm convinced deserves to be better known outside Kerala, a man called Srinivasan Guru. He is known in the southern tip of your state, because around the Bangalore area he has a lot of followers, and your chief minister just went and did a big event in honor of him, but he's not very well known north of that, so I'm really hoping that the book helps reach him to English language readers in India, in the rest of India.
You want a serious question, I'll ask you a serious question. So there's a lot of books, and that's a lot of research, and we're in a very complex information environment. I mean, this book itself, is a reflection of a very intensive research process across languages. You're online a lot, you read a lot, you tweet a lot, you're constantly writing articles, sharing articles. And there's moments in this book when you're citing historians, you're citing linguists, you're citing theorists, but then you're also saying, I saw this thing online by the anonymous, poster on, the site formerly known as Twitter. And you sort of move between different kinds of modes of attribution and different kinds of writers. And so on the one hand, it seems like a democratic citational practice or something like that. But I also think that on the other side, there's this risk of a total breakdown of authority. So how are you thinking about that in this moment? Like, how do you parse good versus bad information?
Well, let me explain that in my recent books, perhaps because I've become so visible as a public figure in India, I've had a lot of help on the research side. So it started with an era of darkness where there was a vast amount of material I had to collect before I could plow through it to write the book. And I had as many as 3 researchers help me who had the time to go and dig up academic articles, journals, stuff, historical documents, out-of-print books, all of that. With this one, A Wonderland of Words, I was very lucky in that I had a retired English professor who did all the serious research. So all the stuff quoting linguists and etymologies of words and so on have come from serious stuff she's dug up. And all the references to online things and jokes I've seen and quotes I've come across, and of course my favorite extracts of Woodhouse or Tintin comics, that comes from me. So the serious stuff is from a scholar, and I'm very blessed to have her help. She's Professor Shiba Tattil who did that. But the truth is that helps, because it does mean that there is stuff in the book that has been researched and verified, and you won't be misled on anything in the book because it's all been sourced and footnoted as well. But there's also fun, and Ragini thinks that implies a loss of authority, but I don't really care, Why can't I quote a Tintin comic when you have these characters sort of screaming abuse with some wonderful long sort of can't pick them up words, right? Billions of blue blistering barnacles is a great, great curse. I actually taught my young sons to curse that way when I was afraid they'd be infected on the American school campus by, shall we say, words of fewer letters. So I suggested to them that this was really the right thing to do when they were really angry. And for a while, they actually believed me. And I think you had these 2 little Indian kids running around the United Nations International School in New York saying things like troglodyte if somebody said something offensive to them.
This would probably be a good time to read an excerpt maybe from the book.
Which one do you want? There's so much.
Anything you'd like.
But since we're talking about my sons insulting others, let me There's a chapter called Literary Insults that Ragini
It's a
mentioned
good one.
she liked. So I'll just read a few bits of it, not the whole chapter, but just to give you some flavor. As early as 1652, the Scottish writer Thomas Urquhart inveighed against quomodo conquising clusterfists and rapacious varlets. These words, alas, never quite survived into contemporary usage, but the Oxford English Dictionary informs us that someone who is quomodo conquising makes money in any possible way. I think we all know some people like that, right? While a clusterfist is a close-fisted fellow, a clown, a boor, a lout, the 17th century also gave us cockwomble, another word sadly fallen into disabuse, meaning a man who is prone to making idiotic statements and or behaving inappropriately while thinking himself superior and being convinced of his own importance. No prizes for guessing a few very prominent people who follow that definition. 4 centuries later, I had the world seems even more full of cockwombles than ever before. Then, since it's about literary insults, Virginia Woolf, whose diaries revealed a rare talent for insults, she wrote about pale, marmoreal T.S. Eliot was there last week, like a chapped office boy on a high stool with a cold in his head. This is all in her diaries. Huh? As for Sigmund Freud, he was a screwed-up, shrunk, very old man with a monkey's light eyes, paralyzed, spasmodic movements, inarticulate but alert. And I've got a few more Virginia Woolf insults if you like those. Of Catherine Mansfield, she wrote, "Her mind is a very thin soil laid an inch or two deep upon very barren rock." So anyway, she didn't think very highly of James Joyce's masterwork, Ulysses. An illiterate, underbred book, it seems to me, the book of a self-taught working man, and we all know how distressing they are, how egotistic, insistent, raw, striking, and ultimately nauseating. I'd hate to have been reviewed by Virginia Woolf, I could tell you. But writers, of course, should never be cross because they can always skewer you with words. Graziano speaks an infinite deal of nothing, a Shakespeare character memorably told another. Charles Dickens wrote of a character, "He would make a lovely corpse." George Orwell dismissed another, "He is simply a hole in the air." An Ernest Hemingway character says, "I misjudged you. You're not a moron. You're only a case of arrested development." Agatha Christie is the politest of the lot. "If you will forgive me for being personal, I do not like your face." But the prize still goes to Shakespeare. I desire that we be better strangers. So much better than unfriending an ex today.
Has anybody ever
Unfriended me?
No. written an insult to you to rival one of those?
No, actually not. I'm afraid the trolls who go after me, I'm afraid, prefer the words of fewer letters and syllables than literary insults, yeah.
So you've become famous, and also this book, right? It's very hard to read because a lot of the books are, a lot of the words are totally inscrutable and hard to pronounce for the average reader like me, who's not, I won't even say all the words.
You're not an average reader. You're a professor of English.
What's your floxinoxinoxinox? What's that word?
Fluxinosinihilipilification.
Yeah. So
which is the act of estimating someone or something as worthless.
Yeah. So most people, I would guess, more people are like me and don't immediately know how to say this word. But I also definitely don't know how to spell it. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about spelling. You say as much in the book, I think chapter 15, English spelling is ridiculous, right? Doesn't make any sense often, it's absurd. And yet, people who don't spell or who spell badly are judged are often judged, as if it's a sign of intelligence, or like even people like accent discrimination. There's a kind of spelling discrimination, and now we have autocorrect. And I mean, what is the value of spelling? Should we feel bad if we can't spell these crazy words?
Yeah, no, it is bad because unfortunately spelling is the one thing everyone has to have in common to understand each other. So if you read something which is misspelled, you often won't get the exact sense. And of course, spelling mistakes are also distracting. Not to mention the fact that there are so many similar words that have different spellings, and the different spelling is what makes the right use of the word. So you're constantly coming across those. But English is irrational. And in fact, it's one of those things where you really have to read widely to be comfortable with different spellings of obvious words. And for foreigners, for example, I begin with the whole episode of I Love Lucy, which is this American sitcom where this American lady married to a Cuban-American immigrant is trying to get him to read English. And she starts saying, cough, and he says co, and she says, no, it's pronounced O-U-G-H, and cough is pronounced off. So then he's reading about the bough of a tree, and he says buff. And she says, no, it's not buff, it's bow. And so it goes on and on with though and thought and so on. And there are sort of, rough, and there are about a dozen different ways in which O-U-G-H can be pronounced. George Bernard Shaw famously said that if you actually follow the rules of English spelling, fish should be spelt G-H-O-T-I. And people said, why? He said, G-H as in rough, O as in women, T-I as in motion, fish. So, I mean, that's the sort of inconsistency and irrationality of the English language.
So which brings me back to autocorrect. And there's some clever observations you make on something kind of like autocorrect, which is the old, the question of misprints and mistakes. When United Nations becomes untied nations and so forth. And so, yeah, so I guess
Which is actually very accurate now as a typo.
What's a memorable autocorrect you've had to deal with recently?
Oh God, there are too many. Honestly, there are. But it's particularly bad with people's names. You type a name, and I have a chief of staff for the last year and a half, a new guy, and every time I type his name, autocorrect turns into something else. I remember a colleague at the United Nations who had the wonderful Belgian name of Sommerans, and when I typed Sommerans, autocorrect would make it somnolence, which unfortunately was quite applicable to him because he did often look sleepy. So once or twice the autocorrect would actually go out to somebody, and it would be extremely embarrassing, to put it mildly. I'm also very often tripped up in haste in my tweets when autocorrect says something absolutely absurd that I didn't intend to say. But anyway, and now the software on your mobile now learns. So whenever I write the word wretched, it immediately suggests the next word autocorrect. So that's my experience with autocorrect.
So let me ask you a quick question, a couple more questions before I turn it over. But you also have a lot of really smart observations about punctuation in this book. Yeah. And I'm sure we have some folks in this room, so to speak, who have used ChatGPT. And ChatGPT is really into the M dash. I don't think you have a chapter on the M dash, but why is that, do you think? Why you have a chapter on the hyphen? What is the deal with the LLM and the M dash?
It's a curious phenomenon because you're right. In fact, there's even now something going around about how people who use M dashes are accused of having used ChatGPT. I don't even have ChatGPT on my phone, but I've been accused of it because an M dash is a long dash. What I do is I usually type 2 hyphens. And some softwares merge the 2 hyphens together to create an M dash. Some don't. They show 2 hyphens with a little space between. But I mean, the fact is that the dash as a way of preceding an amplification point or for that matter, a list of clarifications or whatever, that long dash is a sensible, comfortable thing to do. Why those people who program the AI systems apparently use a lot of M dashes, so that AI now uses them all the time, is extremely difficult to say. Conversely, AI hardly ever uses the colon, which is one of my favorite punctuation marks. I'm often using the colon. So that may be my way of asserting my independence from the world of ChatGPT. Use a colon, or a semicolon for that matter. AI is also very fond, I'm told, of very short sentences. So it won't say, this is not a crisis. it's an opportunity. For example, somebody in the pre-AI era might write, it's not a crisis, semicolon, it's an opportunity. AI will write, it's not a crisis, full stop. It's an opportunity, full stop. But then it'll go on to have more terms without even the it's and, apparently. So it'll say things like, a window to the future, or whatever, in short sentences. And that's another way that English teachers figure out who's been doing their kids' homework. So watch out, any youngsters in the audience.
Let me ask you one more thing before I turn it over. This is a book in which you're clearly having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And it's fun, and it's funny, and it's wide-ranging. And a lot of it, I was making that joke about the Floxy Noxy and whatever, but there's also a lot of that kind of, again, like big, supercalifragilistic kind of words, their histories, all of that. But I wonder if you could give us an example of kind of the opposite, which is some very plain, accessible, simple phrase or word that also, or something that you've said or something that you've read that also gives you that kind of pleasure. And has the kind of the frisson of the long and convoluted stuff.
Look, I think communication is about being understood. So obviously a simple, direct statement is very often the most gratifying. What could be more satisfying than being told by someone, I love you, right? Not a very difficult phrase to understand, but it means a lot, depending on who's saying it, whether you welcome the sentiment, whether you reciprocate the sentiment, and whether you feel it. And that's ultimately what matters. One of the things, in fact, in this book, there's a chapter about words that don't exist in English, which are words for certain kinds of feelings that are apparently expressed or experienced enough in other languages that they have words for it, but English has never had it. And so, in fact, I'm trying to remember where that chapter is. Do you remember where? Well, yeah, here we are. There are terms, for example, as a Malayali, and I know there are some in the audience, let me say I've often pointed out that we have a word in Malayalam that doesn't exist in English, which is etramate. That is, if you're looking at 20 people in a line and somebody says, I want you to meet my cousin, you can just say, instead of saying which one is he in that line, you can just say etramate alana. And etramate means which item in a numerical list or in the order of something. Very useful word for going to a car lot where you're renting a rental car or whatever. But there is no such thing in English. You have to say, in which number position is my car parked or something like that. Or in which order is your cousin standing in that long queue or whatever. That's the only way you can find out. One word, matramte. But there are other things. For example, the Swedish word lagom refers to when something is just the right amount. You don't specify a number, but you convey its exactitude. Lagom represents the idea also of living a balanced life. Enough in English doesn't measure up to labom. Similarly, the Danes have come up with a word that I'm not sure I can pronounce, hygge, H-Y-G-G-E, which combines coziness, comfort, well-being, and contentment all in one word. So hygge, if you're really feeling good about yourself in a certain moment, what you're feeling is hygge. And finally, the Russian novelist Vladimir Nabokov, who wrote in English, but though he was born and brought up in Russian, and that was his first language initially, he introduced English readers to the word Tosca. And I'm quoting Nabokov here. No single word in English renders the meaning of Tosca. At its deepest and most painful, it is a sensation of great spiritual anguish, often without any specific cause. At less morbid levels, it is a dull ache of the soul, a longing with nothing to long for, a sick pining. In English, you could try melancholia, but Russians swear that doesn't go far enough, because Tosca is an inexplicable sadness, undirected at anyone or anything in particular, and implies a feeling of deep longing or wistful sadness without any coherent reason. Try and capture that in one simple word, Tosca.
Okay, let's let some audience members jump in, please. Yes.
6 minutes and 9 seconds is what we've got left on the clock here.
Hello. Yeah. Hello.
I think there's one in the front already.
Okay. Some ground rules. Actually, one ground rule. Ask your question very briefly. State your name. Go directly to your question. We don't want to hear your story. We want to hear his. Okay? Very
that's
short
very rude.
questions.
Hello, sir.
That's a bit rude. Okay. Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Hello, hi. My name is.
Wherever you are, go ahead. Oh, right here. Ah, okay.
Hello,
Thanks.
sir. My name is Parth, and I'm from Rajasthan.
Great.
I'll very briefly ask my question. Have you had any chance that you encountered Bangalore English, the English which is spoken by youngsters here in Bangalore?
Tell me, give me an example. I'd love to learn. I'm always proud of learning something new every day, and this is going to be my learning for this.
Since I come from Rajasthan, I came to Bangalore 3 years ago.
Uh-huh.
I was very excited to come to Bangalore as it's amalgamation of, I'll do it brief. Yeah, so it's different people, so I expected they'll speak much professional English, but my classmates, I came here for college, my classmates and my peers, they always address that, come off, we'll dip off to church street and then we'll put full sightseeing, and I was very astonished at first that what type of English is this? That, did I learn something wrong, or what type of English is this? So have you ever had a chance to...
No, I haven't, but the truth is nothing is wrong as long as it's understood. As long as the same expression,
Just one. Hello, sir.
as long as the same expression means the same thing when you're saying it and the person hearing it saying it. But if you try your Bangalore English in Calcutta, you might have a problem, or in Rajasthan.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
My name is Nasheed. I'm a very, very big fan of yours.
Thank you, Nishi.
I'm an Indian living in Paris, so bonsoir.
In Paris?
Yes.
Oh, très bien.
And I think I specifically wore this shirt because I think Shakespeare had you in mind. I would challenge you to a battle of wits, but I'm afraid
I
you're
would challenge you
unarmed.
for a battle
I
of
wouldn't-
wits,
wits,
but I see you are
but
unarmed,
I
is
see
that right?
you're unarmed, yes. I think he had you in
That's a
mind.
good literary insult.
Thank you.
Well
Thank
said.
you. Wonderful.
Mr. Tharoor,
Yeah.
some of the words that you have coined of late have become a phenomena and bigger hits than the blockbuster movies of the Bollywood. Now my question to you is, what situation or what triggers the thought process of those words? Is it a news or a WhatsApp thing? What is it?
No, but you know, I didn't actually invent most of these words. They exist. The problem is they've fallen out of common use. I can swear that the word farrago was used routinely in debates in Delhi University when I was a student. But when I, having been appalled by an awful show by a journalist, wrote that this was a farrago, suddenly the Oxford English Dictionary was tweeting in puzzlement, why is this word farrago, which is never looked up by more than 5 or 6 people in the day, suddenly had 1 million hits today? And the 1 million hits mainly came from people, of course, who had read my tweet, right? Well, all of them came from that. So, I mean, the fact is, I was myself taken aback when suddenly people started opening Twitter accounts calling themselves Mr. Farrago and so on, because they discovered this word. But it's a word we've used before. I mean, and so I honestly wasn't trying to invent it. And all it means is a mishmash, but Farrago sounded better than mishmash. Today, I suppose more people know mishmash than Farrago. That's life. Yeah.
Good evening, Dr. Tharoor.
Whoever's got a mic should go ahead.
Yeah.
Hello. Not a question exactly. My name is Manasa and I'm from Bangalore, so this is Bangalore English. Hello. So I just wanted to tell you that I'm ever so grateful for a personality like you in our country. You're such an inspiration to all of us.
Thank you.
And we love you. We love everything about you, and we absolutely love the way you stand up for the country. And thank you so much. And it's a request. I don't know if it's going to happen. I just bought the book, and I was hoping, and I would be ever so grateful if you can sign it for me.
I'll stay on for signings. Yeah,
Yes.
I'd be happy to sign
Thank you
it.
so much.
Thank you very much for this kind words.
Good evening, Dr. Tharoor here.
Yeah. Wherever. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Such a pleasure to be here along with you.
Thank you.
I'm a great fan of yours. My name is Bhuvana.
Hi, Bob.
So, 3 words that are really close to you. I know you have a maybe entire book, but 3 words.
Oh my gosh. No, I mean-
that is like, when you hear it, you love it. Something like that.
No, I mean, it's just that, look, God, praise be the Lord, whatever, I have more than 3 words inside me, so I can't just pick up 3 at random. One of the words I've always my favorite that I always tell people is my favorite word, though it really isn't, is the word read, because that's the best way to acquire more words. So read would be one of them. Another one that I think I would probably enjoy simply because I would love to see it used more often is a word I was very fond of in college, which is defenestrate, which means to throw out of the window. Now, defenestrate is actually not literally throwing someone out of the window, but kicking them out of a job, out of an organization, out of a situation, out of your home, out of a room, throwing out an idea, throwing out something else that you're rejecting utterly. I've defenestrated that thought. I've defenestrated that idea. Somebody's been defenestrated from my cricket team, whatever. It's not a bad word, defenestrate. And then perhaps one of the words that I did come up with when I was challenged to, I think it was the Pune Literary Festival, challenged me to invent a word, and I thought there would be a case for making up a word that described a sort of relationship that was not necessarily intimate, romantic, sexual, whatever, but was a connection between souls. You know, you sometimes meet somebody and you feel, my God, my soul recognized his or hers. And so the word I came up with, because English borrows words from various languages, was Atmami. Atma from Sanskrit for the soul, and Ami from French for this young girl here, for friend. And Atmami, I thought, would be somebody who was a kindred spirit, a soul in common. There you are.
Hi, I'm Siddharth. Very
Sure.
good question. Should prepone now be legalized and formalized? And what are the other very useful Indian English words that you would like to be used without any shame or without any inferiority and be legalized?
Yeah, well, I've got an entire chapter on that, so I don't want to completely deprive you of the joy of reading it. I will say, though, that what matters with Indian English is using it in India. You know, because, for example, when somebody abroad tells you, so-and-so is my brother, don't say, is he your real brother? Because he'll think you're accusing him of having imaginary siblings. The fact is, India is the only country where we have this expression, real brother, for the simple reason that we call cousins also brothers. And so what the questioner is asking is same parents or not, right? Similarly, we have invented some words through Indian journalism like air dash. I thought I had invented prepone, which I did more than 50 years ago, but it turned out somebody else had invented it 50 years before that, but it had never been used in English. It was just there once. And so prepone is not very common outside India, but is widely used in India. In England, for example, they say, can we advance that appointment to prepone it? I think prepone is much more convenient and practical.
Hello, sir.
Hi, that may have to be the last question, getting warning signs saying times.
Hello, sir.
Yeah?
Good evening.
One more?
Good evening, Shashi.
I'm Anushka. My question is very simple. We come across the word of the year every year. This year it's rage bait.
Rage bait,
we
yes.
had riz, which was another word. And I just had this thought, was it the same back many years ago? Or was it someone invents the word and then it's put up on the dictionary as a word of the year? Or how did it go like? Because I just had this in mind.
No, the Oxford English Dictionary used to bring out supplements every year. So they did often incorporate words and they would explain the etymology and so on. What's happened in recent years is a lot of the words of the year are coming from contemporary internet usage. So vax has been the word of the year for vaccination, which in the old days would just have been considered an abbreviation, but it's now considered a legitimate new word, or riz, which is also just a contraction of the word charisma. So, I mean, you could argue that it's simply that, if you like, a democratization of the... I've actually, because this book was published a year and a bit ago, there are chapters for the 3 previous years' words of the year. And I describe how these things come about, so you might enjoy that. But you know, the language is constantly evolving. And one of the great things about English is that unlike French, which I love as a language, French has all these guardians and custodians. They have an Académie Française that decides what words are acceptable in French. So when French people started using the word weekend because it was so convenient to describe Saturday and Sunday, the Académie Française ruled that French would not accept the word weekend and people had to say la fin de la semaine or la fin de semaine. But anyway, the point is that's what they were doing. Now, in English, there is no such guardian or high court of the language. Everyone can use the language, and whatever goes into currency, whatever is commonly used, survives and comes into dictionaries eventually. What dies out, loses out. It's as simple as that. And that, I think, is one of the greatest strengths of the English language. So it'll borrow from Hindi, it'll borrow from the internet, it'll borrow from American, and it'll all become part of, that's accepted. And there's one more thing that's happening is the increasing universalization of the language. So American usage, British usage, Australian usage, thanks to the internet, is now spreading around the world. And maybe one day, you might actually find some Englishman saying, I'm mugging for an exam. I don't believe it, but it might happen.
Good evening. Good evening, Shashi.
Whoever has the
Tharoor,
mic,
one question from the back.
Good evening, Tharoor. This is Moti
One question
here.
from the back, please.
I'm listening to the mic.
This
That's
is
all I
Moti
can do.
here. You got a new book coming on Constitution. Whom would you present it first, to Modi or to Rahul Gandhi? And what are the two statements which you would state to each of them differently?
Look, as far as my book on the Constitution is concerned, I'm going to have the great honor of presenting it tomorrow to the 98-year-old Justice Venkatachalaya. So that is who I present it to. And that's, I do that and I go to the airport to fly back to Delhi. But, you know, honestly, this isn't a political forum. The last time I made the mistake of talking politics in the forum, I ended up in court for 6 years and the case is still going on. So I would rather not go into politics right now. Thanks. Yes, anyone else with the mic?
Yeah, from the back.
One last question is all we have time for.
Well, whoever has the mic, I think will.
Yeah, whoever.
Can I go?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi, hello.
This
good
young
evening,
lady
sir.
here with the mic?
Yes, right
Yeah.
here. My name is Kinjal. I have actually just moved to Bangalore maybe a year and a half ago or something, and I'm still finding it very difficult to adapt to the language here. I come from one state over. This shouldn't be as difficult as it is because there are so many loan words. Are there, because you have the experience of learning so many languages, do you have any tips for adults who are trying to pick up something new as a necessity or just as a passion, I would say?
Look, I mean, honestly, the only way to learn a language is to use it and hear it. I remember, for example, when I was trying to learn French in Geneva, and I was taking these courses, true, but what I was also doing is watching mindless stuff on television, because in those days, everything was dubbed in French. So there'd be John Wayne as a cowboy on a horse, drawling in French. But as a result, I got used to the sound of the language. And similarly with Bangalore, go out on the streets, go to the cafes, go to the buses, and hear Bangalorean whatever, spoken. That's the only way you'll really pick it up. But language is really meant to be used, to be heard, to be uttered. It's not something that you get, I think, very well out of textbooks. So let it be a living language, just as my book on the Constitution is called Our Living Constitution. That's the spirit.
Thank you, Dr. Tharoor. Thank you, Ragini. Can we hear it for him one last time, please?
Thank you, Ragini. Great question.
He will be heading out to the bookstore. He will be signing books under the stairs over there. So if you have a question for him that you couldn't ask here, please go there, buy a book, and that is your ticket to ask him the question. That's the end of day one of the Bangalore Literature Festival. I will see you tomorrow again at 10 a.m. Thank you very much. Good night.